Hi, hi everyone. Hi everyone. Can you hear me, Colin?
Hey, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, and how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for joining us. Let me just introduce this session. So, hi everyone, and welcome to this new session of architecture short films, Arquitectura en Corto in its Spanish version. As you might already know, due to the actual situation, we decided to launch these online live talks where we can review with directors, architects, and interior designers some of the short movies that we selected and that are free to access through our YouTube channels or at arquitecturaencorto.com. Today, we have a very special guest, the director and design fan, Colin Chee, who is the brain behind the YouTube channel series Never Too Small, which reached
Hello.
high, which reached more than 1 million subscribers, and that through short videos portrays the micro-living lifestyle of young professionals around Australia, UK, and Europe. So, how are you, Colin?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You know the situation now in Spain, where we are based at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's why we decided to make this kind of interviews and interaction through an online platform, which in this case is Instagram. So thank you very much. I just would like to add that our viewers can place any question using the question mark button below. So I can see and I can read all the questions and I can read them to you. So thank you again for joining us in this conversation about micro apartments. For the ones who are new here, you can see on our YouTube channel a selection of short videos created by Colin or at the platform that Colin is in charge for, which is nevertoosmall.com. So I would like to ask you,
Yeah.
and I would like to know how this idea came up and how did you reach such a massive audience?
Well, I live in a 38 square apartment in Melbourne, in Australia. And then when I first moved in, I used to look at a lot of YouTube videos for inspirations, as well as Pinterest and Instagram as well. And then, but I do realize that a lot of videos back then, about 7 years ago, on YouTube, there were not many videos that featuring designers or architects talking about the design. And then, and about 2.5 years ago, I was still, looking at a lot of videos on YouTube, and I thought, well, I could do something better than that. And as well as trying to get free advice from designers and architects, and as a chance for me to go and visit a place. And yeah, so I started 2.5 years ago with just 4 videos. And my first idea for Never Too Small is to feature tiny spaces as well as small design and art. And I approached this idea for the company I work with, which is a video agency called New Mac, based in Melbourne as well. And I talked to my boss, James McPherson, saying I have this idea to create like a short videos about tiny spaces design.
And what did
And
he
then he said,
say?
oh, and he just said, all right, just do whatever you want. And then we picked that up as like a side project for our company. And I started approaching a few architects in Melbourne at first because we don't have money to travel yet. And luckily, there's an architect named Ben Edwards, which is very close to our office. He agreed to let us film his apartment called Microlux, and that's our first episode. So we
Oh
published
yeah.
in July, in July 2017. And Microlux was a very short 2.5 minutes video. And then we made 4 more episodes and just parked the videos on YouTube. And then for some reason, Google's algorithm do its magic, and we started to have months later, about 4 or 5 months later, we started to have subscribers, and the view increased. And we didn't do anything for the next 5 months until 2018, and we saw the numbers increasing. And James saying that maybe it's something worth for us to explore a bit more, so we make more episodes. And
Because you've
that's
been
when
traveling. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
You've been traveling around Europe now, so you have, because
yeah,
you're based in Melbourne,
yeah.
but I've watched several videos of yours, and you've been like hanging around Europe. So it's not just a trend that we can see in Australia. Do you think that it's a global trend living in such a small
It's
apartment?
it's definitely a global trend for small footprint. For myself, like small footprint living is sort of a practical thing for us to do in big cities or in urban settings. Because globally, the global population is about 7.6 billion people, and more than half of them actually live in the big cities, like Sydney or Melbourne or in Barcelona or wherever, London. And then there's like what 3.6 billion people for a couple of big cities. And cities itself can only grow that much, even though we have the urban sprawl and getting bigger and bigger. But then still, cities just like a main hub for businesses, and a lot of people work in the cities. But for myself, I work in the cities as well. For me to live in the cities and then close to where I work, it's very practical. Yeah. So I
Well,
think small footprint
do you
is
live in how
practical.
many square meters do you live?
Sorry,
In how many in
square
how big
meters.
is your flat basically?
It's 38 square meters. It's basically, if you were to put it into car park, it's probably like 3.5 car parks.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I can show some of the project that you've been documented here and in Australia and in Europe. So you can see there are really clever solutions for the storage, etc. Um, do you think that these small spaces allowed and push people to have a deeper connection with the city they live in? What's your experience interviewing all these architects, etc.?
I guess living is in the city itself, you have to sort of embrace everything that city has to offer. Not to say have to, but you sort of embracing, But for smaller apartments and things like that, because living in the city is quite expensive if you want to buy a bigger apartment. But smaller apartments for young professionals or small family, it works. And in terms of talking to architects and whatnot, I think design itself sort of improve our quality of life. Yeah, and through
But
design we have like better solutions for storage and whatnot. But it's at the end of the day, living in the small space is a lot to do with lifestyles and mindset. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Because I guess one of the main reasons why young professionals like you or like me decide to live in such tiny houses is because they prioritize location over size.
yeah,
Is it one of the
exactly.
main reasons, basically? Everyone wants to live in the city center, but probably this is the only way to really afford this kind of living.
It's more like a compromise living, I guess, but doesn't mean that you have to sort of not having any quality. Like we live in a city, I kind of have the mindset of, I might have a smaller pantry, but there's a supermarket across the street. So supermarket itself is like my pantry. If I need anything, I just go across the street to get it. Less than 1 minute walk. And as well as, yeah, what's your question again? Sorry, I just forgot.
No, it's about the fact that the people basically they decided to live in such small places because they are
Yeah,
located in the city center, so they prioritize location over size. So that's
yeah.
probably one of the main reason why they push themselves to live in such small places. I have a question from one of our viewers. They are asking small places but high budgets. Do you think that uh, a good design like the ones that you've seen that you've been documenting in your short videos are expensive, or there is like a normal average that small places like this have really good design, but doesn't mean that it has to be a high budget design? What do you think about that?
I guess for smaller footprint per square meters, it's definitely more expensive than the big ones in the suburbs. And but applying design, if you have the budget, you can get like a good designer, architects to do it for you. But in terms of people who don't have a budget, one of the things that I created, Never Too Small, even myself, my apartment is very much DIY. So, but what we are featuring is like the best design that we can find out there, or the creative ideas that you haven't seen before online. Or, like the architects and designers, they are the professionals that provide us with ideas and solutions. But as a consumer ourselves, if we can't afford that, we can make it our own. And a lot of the things, what I realize is, for me growing up in Asia, in Malaysia, not from a very rich family, we used to make our furnitures a lot. And also, nowadays you have all this convenience of getting furniture from IKEA, and you can actually hack it and make it into something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the design you see on Never Too Small not necessarily means that you have to put 50, 60,000 Aussie dollars to make it work for you, but you can also, make it your own, improvise it, use the creativities. So Never
You can
Too
be a
Small itself
maker.
is like Never Too Small stuff as like a reference book. Like when you go to the bookstore, you open like a home design book, you look at them, you don't necessarily think that I'm going to have similar thing. You just pick up ideas here and there and make it your own and make it works for you. Yeah.
Definitely. I have another question. I've seen probably all of your videos on YouTube, and as far as I can remember,
Yeah.
I've never seen families with any children occupying these spaces. Do you think that this kind of minimalistic lifestyle is suitable just for singles?
I guess a lot of places we film, they are minimal, well, they are sort of having a minimalist lifestyle, but we actually have two apartments that have children in there. And I guess if you have one or two children, it probably works for like 40, 50 square meters, tiny apartments or tiny house. But for myself, I think a lot of small places, like young professionals like you and I, we are in a different phases in life. We are still single, or we have a partner, or we have a dog. But if you have a growing family, obviously you have to find something slightly bigger. Because for me, like one's life doesn't confine, or you just stay in one house. As you grow up, you stay in your family home, and as you move forward, when you become older and you move to maybe a small apartment, and then when you get married with children, you move to a bigger place. And when you get older, when the children left home, you probably downsize again. So I think in our life, we sort of go through that phases. So for Never Too Small, we are not pushing people saying that small spaces work for everyone. It's definitely not working for everyone. It's more like giving you a chance to look at what great design can do for small space living. That not necessarily means that you have to live small and feel great. Yeah.
It's a kind of um, it's a new way of living, but especially as I can see from your videos, in a way, it represents the willing of owning less. Is
Yeah.
that, or at least that's the feeling that some of us, and especially me, are perceiving from the interview that you're making in your videos. Do you think that it's true? There is this kind of willing of owning less, and that's why people decide to live in such small places?
If you ask me 20 years ago, living less probably a bit more difficult, because 20 years ago our computer is big. If we have a large CD collections and all that VHS tapes or DVDs. But nowadays a lot of things are digital, and then that's also allowed us to sort of cut back the actual objects, but we still have everything with us. And living in a small space, yeah, we definitely need to have less than when you're living in a big house, but not necessarily means that you can't have everything you want. It's more like you are more careful with the choice you make when you're buying something. And in a way, let's say if I want to buy a chair, I would think of, whether the chair suits the apartment, because I have such a small apartment. If the chair also can work as a ladder, if I want to get something from the higher place. So think more careful. And then, you don't just buy 8 dining chairs because you have a big dining room. We probably get 2, and then we choose the 2 that chairs that we really like. In a way, when you're making choices, you think of the quality and the objects that you really like. You probably pay more for it. And then in a way, like the objects you love, you tend to hold on to be a bit longer. And you spend less along, throughout the period of next 5, 10, or 15 or 20 years, you probably keep that object or the furniture that you really like. So in a way, we save money from that sense. And we consume less, which is good for the environment in a way, if you look a bit further ahead.
Actually, I want to talk about the environment just in a few minutes. But before there is a question, one of the viewers is asking if do you think that it's just a European and Australian trend, or is quite common in USA to live in such small places? Because there is a kind of gap, a cultural gap between
definitely
Eastern and Western culture. So do you think they're probably more used in the Asian part of the world to live in small places? What about USA or nations when you have anyway bigger space where you can construct and to build bigger houses?
If you ask me, I would say in terms of comparing the countries, but you see comparing with the cities. If you're talking about a small, tiny town in England or tiny cities, but like in the USA, you have New York and everything, the density is very high. And then you also have, places like Kansas or wherever in the USA where, the real estate is pretty cheap and then still can afford a bigger place to buy. So there's a difference there, not quite about, whether which country is moving forward more to the small space living. I think the small space living is more about need than what you want. Obviously, if someone wants to live in a bigger place, they can afford it. That's great. But if you want to live on the locations, in the city, if you can't afford a bigger place, you settle for a smaller place. And then, that's why Never Too Small works for people who's choosing that kind of lifestyle and choices.
So it's more like it depends on the density of the town itself, more than the county itself to live.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
that's why probably, as you mentioned it, in Kansas, there would be bigger places to live because it's just a question of density. So there is a question that I would like to ask you, which is exactly about the environment. And I guess there are several environmental benefits in living in small scale places. A big house obviously uses more electricity. The heating is quite a problem sometimes, etc. You've been talking with several interior designers and architects over the years. What do they tell you about that?
Definitely energy consumptions. Living in a small space definitely consume less. And then water as well, because you need less water to wash everything else in the house. But I guess talking to the designers and architects, a lot of them were talking about live where close where you work and how you sort of spend your lifestyle. Like I used to live in suburbs about an hour and a half away from where I work, and then every day I have to travel on the public transport or drive to work. It's more like not just about living in a small footprint, but traveling in the less footprint as well. That's making it more sustainable in the long term, and also better for the environment, and economically it's more sustainable as well for my personal finance. And as well as not just that, it's even the material choices that the designer or architect choose. Like nowadays, a lot of the designs that we feature are Never Too Small. They use more like more on the budget materials or more sustainable materials, like plywood and things. But definitely plywoods, there are many different kind of categories, whether it's a good one or the bad one, whether it's made from a sustainable source materials, or so everything that's count to how we sort of in a way making it more sustainable living for urban living, all that thing. And a lot of them also reusing recycled materials.
It's
which
more
is
about
quite
us
common
than
now.
the house itself, as you mean. You mean it's
Yeah,
more
yeah,
about our choices more than the
yes,
place
our
where we live
choices.
in itself. So I
Yeah.
do understand. There is also there is one more question which I would like to show you, which says small kitchen can be a problem in countries such as Spain and Italy. What solution did you see? Um, Kitchens are really, really, really a tough subject here in Spain or in Italy or in France. We
So
really
even
used
myself, I
to
cook a lot.
we really used to have big kitchens. Now are reduced in a way, but it's still like a room where we spend a lot of time because we like
Yeah.
cooking, because we like to invite friends over, which is another problem. So what do you think, what have you seen around Australia and all the flats that you've been visiting during the last 2, 3 years?
Yeah, they depends on the person or you know the resident who occupy the space. Like for myself, I cook a lot. I actually have two kitchens in my tiny apartments, one in the balcony, which is the portable one, and then the one that I normally use on the weekdays, which is the actual kitchens. But you know, if I'm cooking something that's a bit more like I would have called smelly, a bit more pungent, because you know with some of the cuisines that I cook is quite smoky and things. I cook it on the balcony. So I have a portable cooker from IKEA that I bought for only $60. And then if I need more kitchen space, I actually have foldable tables that I can put out. That when I'm not using it, I just slide it next to the fridge, and it's not taking up any space. So it depends, because most of the time when we use the kitchen, we always thought that we don't have enough space. But then on the normal weekdays, we don't use that much space in the kitchens. But only on the weekend, when we want to cook a storm or we want to make a feast, we only need more table space. That's when you can actually use your dining place as a part of the prep. And if I have friends over, my tables, I get a convertible one, which is on the normal days, it only fit 2 people. And then it can extend out to fit 4 people. If I need more, like at one point on the 38 square meters, I actually have 10 people here for dinner from my neighbors as well. And so I get a portable tables that I just put it out, extend the table. And I only have 4 chairs, and I get my piano stool as the chair as well. And I get my neighbors to bring their own chairs. So
You have
it's a bit
lots of
like
stuff there.
yeah, it's a bit like creating a community, you know? When I first moved in this place, I was a total minimalist. I'm not quite a minimalist now. I only have 4 plates. If my friends coming over, I ask them to bring their own plates, and you know, it's sort of because you have to think about your daily life compared to the occasional visits from friends or guests. So you have to make that balance and the sacrifice as well.
So
Yeah.
what you're saying is basically, okay, a good design or a good kitchen is something that you can adapt depending on the situation. So
Yeah,
usually
it's very
you don't really use,
customized. Yeah,
which
sorry.
is that's a good idea. Um, and what about the livability of this flat? Do you think that you can compare the way of living of people in a small place and on a big flat is quite the same, or you have to make choices and you have to in a way decide to keep things and people a little bit outside of your space if you want to live in such a small apartment? What do you think?
Um, I assume your question is do we need to make any sacrifice in terms of the items we own? Or
Yeah, basically.
yeah, um, I don't find any sort of anything that I need to sacrifice living in a small place. It's the same as you know all the places I visit with the people occupied, and you know there were many places I filmed is kind of minimalist approached, or it's been styled. But then there are places that we filmed that people actually live in it. They actually got a lot of things, but they're very clever with their storage. And it depends. It's living in a small space is a bit like it's very tailored to you know how you want to use the space. You have to understand what your needs is before what you want. And for myself, with everything that I own, I choose the things that I really like. And with my, let's say, my wardrobe, anything that I haven't worn for a year or couldn't fit me anymore, I just donate it. And also using the Mary Kondo's the method saying, if the things you left in there, you're not wearing it, they feel pretty sad in the wardrobe because no one is using it, might as well donate to people who needs it. And that also, after moving in here since 7 years ago, I've been collecting stuff, things getting more and more. But occasionally I would edit my place and pick up the things that I no longer need and I just give it away or, take it to recycles. So living in a small space, like the benefits is very easy to clean. At the same time, you sort of know what you have. But not necessarily mean you still can't have everything you want. It's just you have to work cleverly around it. Things that you have to, let go and before you bring something new in. So when you make the choices, you double think everything before you buy it.
Just last two questions because we just have a half an hour. I would like to know if housing after coronavirus should feature bigger spaces and more balconies. Balcony is really, really something that we need lately during the coronavirus. Do you think that now, because of the coronavirus, it will change? We will see a house with bigger outdoor spaces?
We have to think about, I would believe this COVID-19 will pass at one point. And luckily I have a balcony, but I've still rarely used the balcony because it's coming to winter in Australia. It's pretty cold out there. But I still live like every day I work from home. I guess it's more like working from home for such a long time, 8 hours a day, and then living in here as well. It's actually make me rethink how I live in this space. I realized there are a lot of overhead spaces that haven't been used. I could make into storage, and I'm thinking about reorganizing the space. I think people wouldn't think of having a balcony while they are already living in a small space would be a plus. Maybe they do, but for me, I don't. And we still live how we used to live. But in terms of, we become more appreciative of the freedom of going out, freely dining, going to a restaurant and dining. The whole COVID-19 is teaching us not to take things for granted after this. Walking across to the supermarket now, I feel like it's such a privilege to go out and shop for my daily convenience, food and stuff. I would say after this, people will pay more attention to how they live. Before that, people just thinking home is just a place you come home, relax, and go to bed. But now we think of home is where we actually live, no matter whether it's a big apartment or small apartment, it's a big house. We just think more carefully how we interact with the space we live in instead of just a shelter. And then nowadays I have my home office set up. I find a way to make a home office within my tiny spaces. So after this, I believe people will work from home more.
Yeah, definitely it's a trend.
Yeah. And definitely, because in itself is also help with the traffic, in general, going to work, people can work maybe 3 days or 2 days at home and 2 days in the office. That actually can solve some of the city problems that we have right now, which is the, congestion,
the traffic.
facing. Yeah, the traffic and everything else. Yeah.
So what can we expect from your next videos in your channel?
Right now, we sort of can't travel as much, but we push out like a lifestyle show for small living called Small Living. And hopefully we are collaborating with YouTubers and our local friends, making it possible. And hopefully we will continue the series even after the COVID-19, and then we will interview all the architects we featured before with the audience questions. And hopefully that will pick up. And then we will also continue doing Never Too Small whenever we can until this whole lockdown sort of over. hopefully soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to close this interview, I was reading on Daisy an interview to Alison Brooks, who was saying that nobody wants to live in less space. I guess you are the proof that you can live in a really small place and be happy anyway. So thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining us, and
Thank you.
for the viewers that are online, you can watch all the video of Never Too Small directly on the YouTube channel of Never Too Small. But also, Colin made a selection that is available on our playlist in our YouTube channel, Arquitectura and Corto. So thank you very
Thank you very
much,
much, guys.
and I hope you liked it. Bye bye.
Good to speak to you. Stay safe.
Stay
Bye.
safe.